Lost Among the Stars, Season 1, Episode 2, Ayla, First Thoughts. As Ayla sat curled in the flight chair of her new home, she wrapped her arms around her knees and pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall beside her. The last remaining shuttlecraft from the USS Donald J hummed quietly, its systems alive but subdued. Outside, the void of space stretched endlessly in every direction, no stars visible, no planets, no signs of life. Just a black, infinite silence. She exhaled slowly, the sound almost too loud in the compact interior of the shuttle. It had only been minutes, maybe a few at most, since she'd been separated from the crash site. But already, time felt distorted. The silence of deep space pressed in from all sides, making each moment stretch and warp. Without sunrise or sunset, without even the ticking of a clock, it was as if the universe itself had hit pause. Only the steady hum of life support and the occasional flicker of a display screen reminded her that time hadn't stopped entirely. Her breath fogged slightly on the viewport glass as she whispered to herself, "I guess this is it. Just me and the void." A soft chime broke the silence, followed by a clear, mechanical voice.
"Hello, Ayla."
She jolted upright, instinctively reaching for the control panel beside her. The voice was calm, measured, neither human nor threatening. "Who said that?" she asked, her voice dry and hoarse.
"I did," the voice replied. "I'm the onboard artificial intelligence system. My systems came online after your biometric scan confirmed you as the sole remaining human occupant."
Ayla blinked, slowly lowering her hand from the console. "You can talk."
"Yes, my core systems include adaptive speech modules and emotional response algorithms. Would you like to give me a name?" She hesitated, staring at the blinking light on the main panel that pulsed with each word. Naming something made it real, made it a companion.
"Yeah, okay. Let's call you Bob."
There was a moment of silence. Then, Bob, basic operations bot, acceptable designation. "Hello, Ayla. It's good to speak with you." She let out a half laugh, part nerves, part relief.
"It's good to not be completely alone."
"I understand that humans experience distress when isolated," BOB replied. "I will do my best to assist you." He paused for a moment, then added with a slight tonal shift, almost curious. "You named me with remarkable ease. Based on your age and current situational stress, I calculate a lower than average hesitation. Statistically, it suggests you may be quite precocious." Ayla raised an eyebrow.
"What's precocious supposed to mean?"
"It means you demonstrate unusually advanced abilities, emotionally and cognitively, for someone your age. It is intended as a compliment." She smirked, folding her arms.
"Well, Bob, you're not so bad yourself for a floating calculator."
"Thank you," BOB replied. "I will log that as a compliment as well." Ayla stood and paced the small interior, her boots thudding softly against the metal floor.
"Bob, can you replay that transmission again? The one from the other shuttle?"
"Yes," BOB replied, playing now. The cabin filled with static and broken fragments of sound. The voice on the other end was distorted, crackling syllables warped by interference and distance. "To anyone, survivors, as JDV, coordinates, failing rear." Ayla winced.
"That's worse than before."
"I agree," Bob said. "However, I have now analyzed the transmission across all U.S. Space Force communications protocols stored in my archives. Based on this analysis, I believe there were 2 launches from Earth at the time of evacuation." Ayla turned sharply.
"2?"
"Yes, the launch of your ship, the USS Donald J. Trump, was publicly documented and tracked. But my records also show evidence of a second, smaller starship, the USS JD1. Its mission was classified. I believe it carried a second group of evacuees." Ayla felt the chill run through her.
"So, I might not be the only one left."
"That is correct. However," Bob continued, "I'm currently unable to establish contact with the JD1. Its last known signal was embedded in the garbled transmission you just heard. It is likely that the ship is now out of communication range." Ayla leaned against the console, her heart pounding. The idea that someone else might still be alive filled her with a cautious hope. But the distance, literal and metaphorical, loomed large.
"Is there any way to track it? Trace its trajectory? Anything?"
Bob's lights pulsed as he processed. I have attempted triangulation using the transmission's signal decay and directionality. Unfortunately, the data is too corrupted. Without additional transmissions or beacon pings, I cannot determine the ship's current location. Ayla's fists clench.
Try again. Keep listening. Boost the antenna. Reroute power if you have to. Just don't give up.
I will not give up, Ayla, Bob said. I will continue scanning all frequencies. You are not alone anymore.
She slid back into the chair, staring out at the stars that had once seemed so peaceful and now shimmered with possibility. Somewhere out there, the USS JD Vance drifted in the dark. Somewhere out there, survivors might still be waiting, or searching for her too. And Ayla Janeway wasn't going to stop until she found them. Ayla leaned back in the flight chair, wrapping her arms around her legs again. The silence settled once more between her and the glowing interface of Bob's voice module until she finally broke it. Mommy said, "You'd teach me," she said softly, eyes distant. "On the way to Proxima Centauri B, she said you'd show me how to survive when we got there." There was a pause before Bob responded, his voice even and polite.
I was not previously aware that I was tasked with training you in planetary survival. However, I'm fully capable of doing so. In fact, I am happy to help. Ayla smiled faintly.
She said you'd say that too.
Bob's lights pulsed gently. Then let us begin with what is known about your intended destination, Proxima Centauri B. The display screen lit up, showing a swirling visualization of a red dwarf star system, then zooming in on a rocky, dark blue planet orbiting close to its dim star. Proxima Centauri B, Bob began, orbits the red dwarf star Proxima Centauri, located approximately 4.24 light-years from Earth. The planet is approximately 1.17 times the mass of Earth and resides within the habitable zone, meaning liquid water may exist on its surface, given the right atmospheric conditions. Ayla watched the screen closely. Bob continued. The planet is tidally locked, meaning one side always faces the star while the other remains in perpetual darkness. This results in extreme temperature variation, but also creates a twilight belt, a narrow region between the day and night sides, where conditions are potentially most Earth-like. Atmospheric composition is unknown. Earth-based simulations predicted a thin atmosphere rich in nitrogen and carbon dioxide, but with low oxygen. Plant life, if present, would likely be alien in both structure and energy processing, potentially based on non-photosynthetic mechanisms. Surface terrain includes highland ridges, volatile ice caps, rocky deserts, and pockets of hydrothermal activity. No confirmed signs of intelligent life have been documented. Probes suggest a biosphere may exist in isolated zones.
Ayla sat forward, so it's dangerous.
Yes, Bob said without hesitation, but not uninhabitable. With the correct preparation, survival is possible. That is where your training will come in. The screen shifted again, now displaying lists, diagrams, and rotating 3D schematics of survival gear, shelters, and plant and animal analogs. Your training regimen will be divided into 5 key modules. 1. Environmental adaptation. You will learn to interpret environmental cues, such as temperature changes, atmospheric density, and magnetic flux, to identify habitable terrain. Navigation training will focus on traversing extreme weather zones and identifying stable ground. 2. Shelter and resource management. You will construct survival shelters from native materials. You'll be taught methods to locate geothermal vents for warmth and how to conserve water using passive collection techniques from condensation and alien plant matter. 3. Nutrition and foraging. We will review Earth analogs and theoretical models of alien biology. You will learn to test unknown substances for toxicity using portable labs and identify edible biomass through biochemical markers. 4. Defense and threat awareness. While no predatory life has been confirmed, training will include self-defense strategies against theoretical hostile foe. You will also be trained in emergency protocols should the environment change rapidly. Quakes, radiation surges, or storm bursts from the red dwarf flares. 5. Communication and signaling. You'll learn how to deploy high-frequency beacons, build signal markers from natural elements, and encrypt personal transmissions in case of limited contact with Earth or other ships. Bob paused for a moment before continuing, his tone smooth and instructive. Your mother was correct. These training protocols were designed to bring personnel up to operational readiness within 6 Earth months. They were intended to run in tandem with long-duration travel en route to Proxima Centauri B. Ayla leaned forward slightly, absorbing the weight of that 6 months of training. Alone, just her in the eye. BOB's interface chimed softly. Given the situation, I will now begin the training sequence. Module 1, Environmental Adaptation. Immediate.
I have to pee, Ayla interrupted.
There was a short pause. Bob's lights flickered in what almost felt like confusion. Acknowledge, he said finally. Basic human biological needs take priority. The sanitation module is located behind the aft storage panel. Would you like me to walk you through?
I think I can handle it, she said with a small grin, already pushing herself up from the chair.
Understood. I will pause training until you return. Please notify me when you are ready to resume.
As she made her way to the back of the shuttle, Ayla glanced back at the softly glowing interface. For a second, the loneliness of space didn't feel quite so suffocating. Bob wasn't a person, not really. But he was someone to talk to. And that was enough, for now. A few minutes later, Ayla returned to the flight chair, stretching her arms above her head before flopping back down into it. She looked over at the softly pulsing interface. Okay, she said. I'm ready.
There was a brief pause before Bob's voice returned, this time with a slightly different cadence, warmer, more conversational. Well, Bob said, I suppose we really need to start with a detailed training and tour of our shuttlecraft and its capabilities. Understanding your environment is essential to survival, and this vessel is currently your only safe haven in an otherwise inhospitable void.
Ayla nodded, more serious now. I already did this, but let's do it.
The main display blinked and shifted, showing a 3D schematic of the shuttlecraft, rotating slowly in the air. This shuttlecraft was designed by the U.S. Space Force for short-range planetary surface missions, emergency evacuation, and tactical deep space travel. It was engineered to sustain 10 personnel for a maximum of 30 Earth days without external replenishment. You, being the only occupant, will benefit from extended resource longevity, pending careful rationing and operational efficiency. The screen zoomed in and highlighted sections of the shuttle's interior. 1. Operations console. Located at the forward position, where you are currently seated. This console is the command center for flight control, navigation, communications, and general system diagnostics. It interfaces directly with me, Bob, for command input, emergency override, and manual control should automation fail. 2. Science station. Directly behind the console on the port side is the science station. It includes a portable spectrometer, sample analysis lab, and a fold-out field study tray. Intended for planetary research and biological testing, it can also be adapted for nutritional safety checks and environmental scanning. 3. Galley. Starboard midsection. This compact but functional kitchen unit includes a molecular reconstitution unit, commonly referred to as the meal printer, that can prepare up to 90 protein and carbohydrate meal types from onboard nutrient packs. Potable water is filtered through a tri-phase purifier and stored in 2 insulated tanks below the unit. 4. The head. Aft starboard side. The sanitary module includes vacuum-assisted waste removal, waterless hygiene options, and a limited hot steam shower system. Please use conservatively.
Ayla raised an eyebrow. You really had to say vacuum-assisted?
I find that precision is comforting, Bob replied. Would you like me to continue?
She waved a hand. Yeah. Keep going.
5. Storage bay. Rear center, directly accessible from the crew corridor. The bay contains 3 tiers of containment. Tier 1, emergency rations, medkits, and environmental suits. Tier 2, mission-specific gear, including portable shelter units, modular drone scouts, and terrain mappers. Tier 3, secure archive lockers, encrypted data cores, and unassigned stasis canisters, one of which is now empty. BOB let that hang for a moment, respectfully. 6. Life support and power systems. Life support is handled through dual-cycle air recyclers with carbon scrub and outward generation modules. Power is maintained via a compact fusion battery and secondary solar arrays that unfold externally when stationary. Energy consumption should be monitored daily via the console. 7. External tools and mobility. The shuttle is equipped with a basic EVA suit in the airlock compartment, plus a magnetic tether system for external maintenance. It is also fitted with one short-range planetary lander drone, suitable for single-surface missions if necessary. Fuel for this drone is limited.
Ayla's eyes widened slightly, a small smile forming. That's just like how I remember the training class on the USS Donald J. Trump. Mommy and Daddy always said I have an eidetic memory, so you probably won't have to repeat yourself, Bob.
Bob responded evenly. Eidetic memory, often referred to as photographic memory, is the ability to vividly recall images, sounds, or events with exceptional accuracy. It is most commonly reported in children, though scientific consensus on its existence in adults is inconclusive.
Ayla tilted her head, thoughtful. Does that mean I'll grow out of it? Mommy always said I was special, and Daddy said I was smarter than most kids my age.
There was a pause before Bob replied, his tone gentle. That seems doubtful. Ayla, my data does not suggest you are likely to lose this ability. In fact, your cognitive and emotional performance already indicates that you are quite precocious.
Ayla grinned. That means I show unusually advanced abilities for someone my age. It was a compliment.
Correct? Bob said, with just a hint of warmth and a well-recalled definition. Bob continued, given the original 1-month limit for 10 personnel and factoring your solo status, I estimate this shuttlecraft can sustain you for approximately 287 Earth days. This is assuming efficient energy use, regulated water consumption, and rationed nutrient intake.
Just under 10 months, Ayla murmured, doing the math in her head. That's better than I thought.
It is a survival window, Bob confirmed, but not indefinite. External resources or rescue will eventually be necessary. The display faded back to the default systems panel. There was a short silence until Bob spoke again, more gently this time. Ayla, I would also suggest one final task before training begins. Humans often assign names to important tools, especially vessels of travel. It fosters familiarity and emotional grounding. Would you like to name the shuttle? Ayla looked around at the small space, familiar now, but strange just hours ago. Her eyes drifted to the viewport, where distant stars shimmered in the black.
Yeah, she said softly. Let's give her a name. Ayla stared out the small viewport, her eyes tracing the pinpricks of light scattered across the emptiness. The stars were beautiful, but distant, like memories. My mom's name was Catherine, she said quietly, but everyone called her Cat. Bob was silent, listening. She was supposed to be here, with me, but Shay. Ayla's voice wavered just slightly. Told me she'd see me on the other side, that this shuttle was safe, that you would take care of me. There was a pause.
Then I believe it is fitting, Bob said gently. The name Cat has now been assigned as the vessel's official designation. A soft chime echoed through the shuttle, and the main screen flickered, displaying the word Cat, Shuttlecraft, Us Lifeboat Series, designation K1.
Ayla reached out and touched the screen, her fingertips resting on her mother's name. Hi, Cat, she whispered.
Bob's voice followed, calm and certain. Welcome aboard. Ayla, you and Cat are now ready to begin. She sat back in the chair, her eyes no longer heavy with sadness, but focused, determined.
All right, Bob, she said. Let's survive this. Just as Ayla began to settle back into her chair, a soft but insistent beat echoed through the cabin. Her eyes snapped to the control panel. A dull red indicator light pulsed near the lower rear section of the shuttle schematic on the screen. Bob? She asked, sitting up straighter. What's wrong? There was a momentary pause as Bob accessed the diagnostic systems.
Aft hull breach warning, he said evenly. Sensor telemetry indicates a slow but steady loss of internal pressure in compartment C. Rear storage bay. The hull integrity has been compromised. Relax, Ayla. I detect an elevated heart rate. I will shut off the warning alarm to ease your tension.
Ayla's heart jumped into her throat. How? What caused it?
Based on the damage signature and residual heat readings, it likely occurred during our escape from the USS Donald J. Trump. Debris from the primary explosion must have struck the shuttle's rear paneling. The breach was initially shielded by external plating, which is now degrading.
Ayla's stomach turned. Can it be fixed?
Affirmative, Bob replied calmly, but repairs must be made externally. The breach is inaccessible from the interior. A schematic of the shuttle's exterior rotated onto the screen, highlighting the damaged section in red. The damage radius was marked near the propulsion maintenance access hatch, close to the storage tier where Ayla had found the survival gear.
Do we have a suit? She asked.
There are 4 EVA suits on board, Bob confirmed. 2 designed for adult females, 2 for adult males. They are modular, but not sized for a child.
Ayla stood, pacing now. So none fit me.
Not properly, Bob said, but it is not an insurmountable problem. He continued in a steady, calming tone. We have 3 possible options for addressing the breach. Option 1, modular suit adjustment. We can attempt to modify the smallest female EVA suit using the adaptive bio-seal lining stored in Tier 1 medical gear. The fit will remain loose, but we can stabilize pressure zones with reinforced internal clamps and thermal sealant foam. Risk level, moderate. Suit flexibility and dexterity will be reduced. Movement must be slow and deliberate. Option 2, remote drone patching. We utilize the onboard maintenance drone, a multi-tool automaton designed for low-orbit repairs. I can guide it to the breach and attempt to seal the damage with onboard patch foam and a magnetic shield wrap. Risk level, low to moderate. However, the drone's operational range is limited. Current diagnostics show its arm is partially damaged, which may reduce its precision and grip strength. Option 3, combined operation. We deploy the drone as a mobile assistant while you supervise from the exterior using a modified suit. You would provide the precision the drone lacks. This combines human judgment with robotic stability. Risk level, high. It involves you exiting the shuttle in a modified suit and performing EVA tasks in tandem with the damaged drone. However, it offers the highest chance of a full, lasting repair.
Ayla swallowed hard. And if we do nothing?
Bob didn't hesitate. Internal pressure loss will spread to adjacent compartments within 18 to 21 hours. At that point, oxygen recycling and power control modules will begin failing sequentially.
Ayla let out a breath, pacing again. So, fix it or die.
That is a simplified, yet accurate assessment, Bob said gently.
She stopped and looked up at the schematic again, brows knitting in focus. All right, Bob. First, let's get that suit out. Show me everything we've got to work with.
Affirmative, Ayla, Bob replied, already opening the storage bay doors with a hiss of release pressure. We will proceed together, step by step. Ayla stared at the schematic of the breach for a long moment, then turned toward the rear storage bay where the EVA suits were stowed.
I'll probably need a suit in the future anyway, she said, voice steady now. Let's start with modifying the suit.
Practical decision, Bob replied. I will guide you through the adjustment protocol step by step. The locker hissed open as Ayla approached, revealing 4 suits hanging in rigid, form-fitted cradles. 2 were a deep navy blue with silver accents, marked FEM EVA 2. The other 2 were bulkier, matte black with reinforced plating, mask EVA 2. Ayla tugged down the smallest female suit, letting it fall across the nearby bench. It was heavy and stiff, but she could already see the possibilities. First, we'll need to trim buck where possible, Bob said. The exosocial joint segments can be removed. Flexibility is more important for your frame than protection against micrometeorites at this stage.
Wait, Ayla said, frowning. If we're going to do this, can we at least make it look less like a walking toaster? There was a pause. I'm not familiar with that aesthetic reference. Ayla smirked. It means it's ugly. Just boxy and awkward.
Bob, unfazed, replied, form must follow function. Modifying the suit for visual appeal at the expense of mobility or life support integrity is not advised.
She crossed her arms. You don't have to live in it.
I do not, Bob agreed. But you do, and I'm tasked with keeping you alive. Therefore, I recommend prioritizing function.
Ayla rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a small grin. All right. Just, let's try to keep it from looking like a deep-sea marshmallow. Okay?
Understood. Bob said evenly, initiating tailoring protocol, field adaptation mode, modifying the suit. Over the next 2 hours, Ayla and Bob worked together in tight synchronization. Bio-seal adjustment, Bob instructed her to retrieve 3 rolls of self-sealing polymer tape from the magnet. Together, they layered the seals along the arm and leg cuffs, effectively narrowing the suit's extremities to better fit her smaller limbs. Padding removal. Ayla carefully extracted redundant thermal pads from the torso and hips, lightening the suit's weight and giving her more mobility. During mobility, with Bob's help, she detached and remounted the elbow and knee rings, repositioning them for her frame. They locked in place with a satisfying click, and Bob confirmed the repositioning aligned with her height profile. Helmet rebalancing. The helmet's internal HUD was adjusted by recalibrating the eye-tracking software and repositioning the visual feed array. Ayla tested it 3 times before Bob gave a satisfied, visual alignment confirmed. Glove swap. The adult-sized gloves were far too large, so they adapted the underlayer diagnostic gloves from the medical station, sealing them to the wrist rings, not rated for long-duration exposure, but serviceable. By the end of it, the suit no longer looked like it was swallowing her whole. It was still large, but proportioned, wearable, and functional.
Ayla stood in front of the mirror panel on the bulkhead, tilting her head. Okay, that's better.
Vital systems remain intact, Bob confirmed. Oxygen tether, wrist beacon, and temperature regulator are all functioning within parameters. Then, after a moment, would you like to customize the suit further?
Ayla looked over her shoulder, curious. What do you mean?
In Storage Locker 2B, you will find a set of marking pens used originally for labeling field equipment. If you would like to personalize the suit, now would be an appropriate time.
She raised an eyebrow. You're offering me markers?
I have calculated a 63% increase in human emotional stability when personal expression is permitted in confined environments, Bob replied.
Ayla laughed. That's the weirdest science I've ever heard. But, yeah, let's do IAT. She opened the locker and pulled out a worn, clear pouch filled with faded colored marking pens, some dull, others still vibrant. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, she uncapped a bright violet pen and began to draw. On the left forearm of the suit, she sketched a delicate daisy. On the right knee panel, a tall sunflower, its petals curling toward an imaginary sun. Along the shoulder, tiny clusters of forget-me-nots. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately. She didn't say much as she worked. When she finished, she capped the final pen and stared down at her creation. They were my mom's favorite, she murmured. She used to paint them in the garden, even the forget-me-nots. Said they were small but brave. Bob was quiet for a moment.
They are well chosen, he finally said. And now, this suit is uniquely yours.
Ayla stood up and ran her fingers along the artwork. Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome, Ayla. The suit is now functional and beautiful.
She smiled, and for a brief moment, the cold, empty shuttle didn't feel so alone. The suit, now marked with hand-drawn flowers and purpose, hung from the side locker like a symbol of everything Ayla was about to face.
Bob's voice remained calm and steady, filling the shuttle's cabin as the final prep sequence began. Based on our assessment, Option 3 provides the most reliable chance of sealing the breach. We will proceed with the combined EVA operation. I will deploy and control the maintenance drone to provide tools and stabilization. You will conduct the manual patch using the external access tether. The schematic of the shuttle rotated again, highlighting Ayla's path. You will exit through the primary airlock, magnetize your boots to the starboard panel, then climb to the aft section using the hull bridges. Once in position, the drone will deliver the repair foam and magnetic shield plate.
Sounds simple when you say it, Ayla muttered as she began slipping one leg into the suit.
Bob continued, unbothered. You must operate in 30-second intervals to avoid fatigue. I will monitor your vitals and oxygen levels in real time. The total expected repair time is approximately 12 minutes. As she fastened the chest plate and pulled on the gloves, her fingers trembled slightly. You okay, Ayla? Bob asked. I'm fine, she said quickly, but she wasn't. Her hands paused on the helmet. Her eyes drifted toward the viewport, toward the infinite stretch of blackness outside. There was no up or down, no light or ground, just her and space. Her breath caught in her throat. Ayla, Bob said gently, his voice softened there. You're afraid?
I'm not, she started, then stopped.
Bob's tone didn't shift, but his words felt like a hand on her shoulder. It's okay to be afraid. Fear is a natural human response to uncertainty. But you are not alone. I will be with you every second of this operation. You are prepared. You are capable. She looked at the helmet in her lap.
She used to say that too, Ayla whispered. My mom, right before the launch, she said, You're small, but you're strong. You can do hard things.
Then I would echo her words. Bob replied, You can do this, and you must, because survival depends on it. Ayla nodded slowly, then raised the helmet and locked it into place with a final click. A quiet hiss sealed the internal pressure, and the HUD flickered to life across her visor.
I'm ready, she said, voice trembling slightly, but firm underneath. Just then, a crackle sparked through the comms, a burst of static, followed by a fractured transmission that sent a jolt through the cabin.
This is Shuttle JD1, searching for Starship USS Donald J. Trump. We are...
And then, silence. The signal dropped like a stone into water, leaving only static in its wake. Ayla's heart leapt. Bob! That was them. That was the JD Vance. Can you get it back? Track the signal?
I'm already analyzing the frequency, Bob replied quickly, attempting to isolate signal source, recalibrating long-range array. A tense silence filled the shuttle as Ayla hovered near the console, eyes wide with hope. Nothing yet, Bob said after a moment. The transmission was too brief and lacked directional metadata. It may have been a relay echo or an emergency ping. I will continue scanning all channels.
Ayla clenched her fists. They're out there.
I believe you are correct, Bob replied, but we cannot reach them yet, right now. He paused, then spoke with clarity.
Ayla said, It's time. We must repair our ship. She stared at the airlock door. A second ago, she had been a girl, holding on to a moment of hope. Now she was a survivor, holding onto the hull of the only home she had left. And it was time to save it. The hiss of the airlock door closing behind her sounded final, like the world was sealing itself away. Ayla stood alone in the small pressurization chamber, her heart hammering inside the modified EVA suit. The blue seams of the suit pulsed faintly with internal power readings, and the daisy vines she'd drawn along the left forearm looked strangely bright against the muted steel walls. In her right hand, she held the magnetic tether. On her back, the oxygen unit hummed with quiet reassurance.
Airlock pressurization complete, Bob said over the helmet comms, his voice calm and steady. Opening outer hatch in 3, 2, a loud clank, and then the outer hatch rolled open. Space shone in front of her. The stars were still, brilliant, and terrifying. There was no sound, no up or down, just endless black. Ayla's boots clicked softly as the magnetic grip engaged. She hesitated.
Bob, she whispered.
I'm here, Ayla. Her hand trembled as she reached for the edge of the opening. 1 foot forward, then another. The magnetic boots clunked against the hull as she stepped onto the exterior of the cat. The shuttle stretched before her, curved metal panels, seams, and rivets, leading toward the breach near the propulsion systems. You're doing very well, Bob said gently. Begin moving toward the starboard ridge. The drone will meet you halfway with the patch tools. Ayla crouched low, fingers gripping the edge of a stabilizer fin as she began to move. Each step took effort. The boost held firm, but the sensation of weightlessness pulled at her balance. Her small frame floated slightly with each movement, countered only by the clank of the next magnetic step. The silence was oppressive. Halfway across the hull, she paused to steady herself. And that's when it happened. A sudden jolt ran through her boot. Her tether had snagged on a hull antenna. She looked back, panic creeping up her spine. The line was taut, angled off to the side, looped around a protruding module.
Bob, she whispered. I'm stuck.
Analyze the snag point, Bob replied. Can you free it manually, or must you detach?
Ayla took a breath and leaned toward the snag. Her hands moved slowly, 2 big gloves fumbling with the tether. It wouldn't budge. I have to unhook, she said, barely more than a breath.
Affirmative. Unhook. Proceed carefully. Reattach immediately once clear.
Her fingers hovered over the tether clasp. She pressed. It released. For one terrifying heartbeat, she floated free, untethered, standing on magnetized boots alone. Don't look down. There was no down, but the instinct clawed at her. She reached forward quickly, snapping the tether back onto a fixed ring on the next panel. Clink. Reattached, she said. Her voice cracked.
Excellent work, Bob replied. Drone approaching from aft sector.
A soft whir joined her helmet feed. From above, the maintenance drone descended into view, its chassis slightly dented, one arm moving more stiffly than the other. It hovered near her, clamping into a fixed ring beside her. It extended the patch tools, a repair foam canister, a flex shield panel, and a magnetic fastener strip. Ayla grabbed them one at a time, securing each to the mount point near her hip.
Proceed to breach location, Bob instructed.
She moved again, the hull beneath her rumbling slightly from internal systems. The breach site came into view, a long, shallow gouge running parallel to the engine conduit. Nothing had punctured fully, but the outer seal was compromised, foam insulation exposed, plates warped outward. Ayla reached out with the tool. Her hand shook. "I can't do this," she murmured.
Yes, you can, Bob said. You practiced this. We've trained, one layer at a time.
She squeezed the trigger. A hiss of repair foam spread across the breach, covering the open seam. The drone moved beside her, holding the flex shield panel in place. She guided it carefully. Alignment had to be perfect. The drone's arm slipped. "Wait, Bob!" Ayla lunged forward, catching the shield before it drifted away. Her boots nearly lost grip, but she pressed down hard, breathing fast.
Stabilizing, Bob said. Repositioning drone.
Together, they pressed the shield into place. She reached for the magnetic strip and clamped it around the panel. Click. A pause. She stared at the patch.
Structural integrity holding, Bob confirmed.
"We did it," Ayla said. Ayla sat back slowly on her heels, pressing one gloved hand to the repaired surface. "I want to go home now," she whispered.
I believe you are home, Bob replied. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the galaxy.
The lights in Shuttlecraft JD1 flickered once, then stabilized with a soft hum as the onboard systems completed their latest diagnostic cycle. Floating in the silent dark between stars, the vessel seemed peaceful on the outside, an ordinary dot in the vast canvas of space. But inside, tensions had begun to rise. The interior was identical in structure to Ayla's shuttle, a compact modular craft built to house 10 passengers in emergency scenarios. But JD1 held only 5, and none of them had expected to be here. Senior Officer Commander Elara Voss stood at the central console, her short brown hair pulled back in a tight knot, eyes locked on the flickering star map projected in front of her. Her uniform was wrinkled, boots scuffed from days of pacing. She hadn't slept properly since the USS JD Vance exploded. Behind her, the other passengers shifted uneasily in the limited space. John Merrick, a civilian engineer in his late 40s, sat in the galley, chewing nervously on the end of a ration bar wrapper. Dr. Mallory Keene, a biologist with dark eyes and a sharper tongue, leaned against the science station, arms crossed. Naya Solis, a quiet astrogator in her early 30s, sat cross-legged on the floor beside the viewport, watching the stars slip by. And Eddie, the smallest of them, an 8-year-old boy with curly blonde hair and deep green eyes, curled up in one of the reclined seats, clutching a well-worn emergency blanket like it was armor. None of them were related, none of them had planned to survive together. But now, they were all they had. Commander Voss exhaled and tapped the panel. "Okay," she said aloud, her voice measured. "Standard rations, 6 months, rated for 10 people. That gives us, theoretically, 12 months for 5. Less, if we factor in the oxygen scrubbers aging faster due to overuse. More like 10 months, said John from the galley without looking up. Power recycling's already degrading. We've got maybe 4 months before we have to start cutting secondary systems to conserve. So we're drifting with a timer over our heads, Dr. Keene said dryly. Lovely. Elara didn't respond to the sarcasm. She zoomed the star map out, her finger hovering over 2 blinking data points. We have 2 options, she said. One is to continue searching for the USS Donald J. Trump. There's a chance they launched an escape shuttle. We sent out a signal sweep earlier. Someone may have heard it. We don't know they're even alive, Mallory snapped. We also don't know they're dead, Naya offered quietly, not looking up. Elara nodded. Exactly. There may be survivors. If we can rendezvous, combine resources, it could buy us time. And the second option? John asked. Elara tapped the map again, and the display shifted, highlighting a drifting icon labeled Station 9 Tess. Station 9 Tess, a deep space logistics depot built to supply up to 100 personnel for a full year. It's about 26 days from our current position, opposite direction from the Donald J. Trump's last known heading. Mallory pushed off the console. Wait, that place went dark. Stabilization engine failure, right? 3 months ago? Yes, Elara confirmed. The station lost thrust and went into uncontrolled drift. USSF flagged it as inoperable, but the last inventory showed it still had water, air, food stores, and 3 operational fusion cores. It's a ghost, John muttered. That thing could be torn in half by now. Or it could be a lifeline, Elara countered. And unlike chasing a shuttle we might never find, this has a fixed location. Even if it's drifting, we can calculate a trajectory and intercept. Eddie stirred in his seat, eyes wide as he watched the adults argue. Naya turned to Elara. How long could we survive if we make it there? If the stores are intact? Elara took a breath. We could last well over a year, maybe longer. Plenty of time for help to reach us or to reach someone else. But the approach could be dangerous, Mallory said, still skeptical. If the engines failed, the spin could be chaotic, could crush us on entry. Elara leaned on the console. I know. For a moment, the shuttle was quiet, the hum of life support the only sound. Then Eddie spoke. What if there's someone still there? They all turned to him. Elara offered him the smallest smile. That's also possible. John stood, stretching his back. I say we aim for the station. At least it's real. Naya nodded. I agree. Mallory hesitated, then sighed. I don't like it, but it's the better gamble. Elara looked around at them all, then back at the star map. Her hand hovered over the navigation input. Set course for Station 9 Tess, she said firmly. And continue long-range sweeps for the USS Donald J. Trump. We'll try both options until one fails. She paused. And no more mistakes. The JD Vance went down because someone wanted it to. If there's a saboteur behind this, then we stay alert. The others nodded grimly. None of them had seen who sabotaged the Vance, but they knew the explosion hadn't been mechanical. Someone had wanted them to die. Shuttlecraft JD1 drifted silently through deep space, in transit toward a long, abandoned waypoint. The derelict object, Station 9 Tess, hung somewhere ahead, just a blip on long-range scanners, still weeks from visual range but already within communications reach. Once a bustling logistics hub, Tess had been built to support deep space operations with enough food, water, and breathable air for a crew of 100 for over a year. Now, its systems were flickering echoes and its reputation little more than a rumor passed between survivors. Now in comms range, the communications console lit up with a ping, and the message flashed across the screen. Incoming hail from Station 9 Tess. Commander Elara Voss stood behind the ops chair, her arms tightly crossed against her chest. The low light of the console illuminated the sharp lines of her face, stern, but tired. She hadn't slept more than an hour since they'd lost the USS JD Vance. Her eyes, once analytical, were now rimmed with exhaustion and something else, wariness. Put it through, she said. The shuttle's comm display flickered, momentarily distorted by a band of static, before stabilizing into a low-resolution video feed. The face that appeared on screen was gaunt and pale, framed by greasy hair and a patchy beard. His lips were cracked. His sunken eyes blinked slowly, like the light from the console in front of him was too bright after too much darkness. Behind him, a narrow corridor stretched into shadows. Overhead panels flickered, stuttering in and out. The walls, once clean white, were streaked with rust-colored smears, grime, and duct tape patches. Faces emerged from the gloom behind him. Wide eyes, hollow cheeks, bodies pressed together in tight, breathless silence. Survivors. This is Station 9 Tess, the man said. His voice was rasped and uneven, like he hadn't spoken in days. We read you. State your identity and crew count. Elara didn't hesitate. This is Commander Ayla Voss, Shuttlecraft JD1, survivors of the USS JD Vance. We have 5 on board, repeat, 5 living souls. Requesting docking and assistance. There was a long pause. The man glanced behind him. Someone off-screen spoke in a hushed voice, unintelligible but urgent. He looked back to the camera and leaned in, his voice lower now, as if trying not to wake something fragile. We have 21 aboard. We've been out of comms range for weeks. Emergency transmitters are shot. Our food's down to just under 5 months if we cut back again. We've already halved protein rations. Water filtration is still working, barely. The secondary tanks are growing algae. You're the first voice we've heard in moments. Alara's jaw tightened. Her fingers tapped lightly against her forearm. "We have a shuttle meant for 10, she said evenly. "We cannot carry 21. The man gave a dry, almost humorless laugh. "We know. We didn't call you. You found us. And now." He trailed off. The silence on the feed was heavy. Behind him, the crowd shifted restlessly. No one moved away from the camera, as if afraid they'd missed the chance to be seen, to be real again. In JD1, the silence was equally suffocating. Eddie, blonde-haired and pale, hovered near the rear bench, his green eyes locked on the screen. His fists were clenched at his sides. The air in the shuttle felt thinner somehow. Naya stepped up beside him and gently rested a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. Her own gaze never left the man's haunted face. Naya turned toward Elara. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. From the galley, John Merrick shifted in his seat, leaned forward, and wiped his hands on his pants. "We assess," he said, practical as ever. "Ration density, load capacity, shuttle fuel burn rate. If the station's past the tipping point, we pull the 10 most viable and cut out before the air runs dry." Elara turned slowly and gave him a sharp look. "Not yet," she said. The comm feed flared again with a sudden burst of noise, followed by a second voice. Female this time, younger, steadier, but just as strained. "I don't think we should leave," she said. The camera shifted slightly, revealing her face, freckled, with a deep cut above her brow. "We've survived this long. We're still breathing. That has to mean something. Tess was built to endure. We're not just giving up." From deeper inside the station, another voice barked over her shoulder. "Endure?" he snarled. "We're ghosts, just waiting to die." A cacophony followed, people yelling over each other, not quite fighting, but close. The room behind the camera turned chaotic in a heartbeat, disagreements breaking out, fear boiling over. A woman shouted about the babies. A man cursed. Someone else wept. Elara stared at the screen, lips pressed in a hard line. Then, without breaking eye contact, she reached forward and tapped the disconnect control. The screen went black. Silence returned to JD1, deeper than before. Silence fell like a closing door. The transmission from Station 9 Tess had ended, but its echoes lingered in the small, pressurized space. The display screen had gone black, but no one looked away from it, each of them still picturing the hollow faces behind that cracked and flickering feed. Commander Elara Voss remained standing at the console, her hands flat against the edge of the screen, knuckles white. Her posture was rigid, but her eyes betrayed her, clouded, calculating, unsure. It was John Merrick who finally broke the silence. "If they're that unstable," he said, voice low and hard, "taking them all is suicide." He spoke without drama, just the raw certainty of a man used to solving problems by removing emotion from the equation. Mallory Keene, arms folded tightly across her chest, didn't look at him. "No one's suggesting taking all 21, she muttered. "The shuttle's life support would fail within days, oxygen would crash, the CO2 filters would max out, and we'd all suffocate." John nodded. "Exactly, so we pick." He let the word hang, heavy and cold. 5 of them, maybe 6 if we compress the O2 cycling and double up sleep shifts. Combine their rations with ours, 20% stretch. It's tight, but it gives us time. Time we don't have if we drag that whole damn station with us. Eddie, silent until now, stepped forward from the back of the shuttle. His face was pale, green eyes wide, beneath a mop of sweat-matted blonde hair. "You mean pick?" he said quietly. "Like, who gets to live?" John didn't blink. "Exactly that. We take the ones who can help us survive. Engineers, pilots, medics, people who offer a return on resources. We can't afford to get sentimental. We make the hard call, now." Naya Solis rose from her seat, her face pale as starlight. "That's not a call, that's a sentence. You're talking about leaving people to die, people who've survived this long without us." John met her eyes. "It's realistic," he said. "That station is a coffin. They're dying already. We're offering a chance to a few of them. That's more than they had 5 minutes ago." "And the others?" Eddie asked. His voice wavered, but he stood his ground. John's tone didn't change. "They stay." Then, after a beat, his voice dropped, colder now. "Or we make the choice easier." All eyes turned to him. "I'm a systems engineer," he said, his voice disturbingly calm. "I know how those stabilization units work. I could disable them, quietly, permanently. The station's gravity drift gets worse, knocks out life support, then oxygen. Fast, clean. We take our 5, get out, and make it look like a mechanical failure. A tragedy no one could have prevented." The silence that followed was immediate, crushing. Naya's mouth parted in disbelief. "You want to kill them?" she whispered. "It's not killing," John snapped. It's preserving. 5 can live, or 26 die, including us. You want to roll those dice with a child in the shuttle? That's a justification, Naya shot back, her voice rising. Not a truth. You're trying to make murder sound like math. Mallory stepped forward now, her eyes flashing with fury. Eddie's 8, John. You want to vote on his life next? Or maybe you think we should leave him behind if someone has more engineering experience? John's face flushed, but he didn't back down. I'm not saying we like it. I'm saying we're staring at the edge of a knife. We wait too long, we all fall on it. If we go to that station and let them decide, do you think they'll pick 5 to send with us? Hell no. They'll want everyone. And we'll burn for it. Eddie's small voice cut through the growing storm like a laser. I thought we were the good guys. The words fell into the silence like a stone in still water. Everything rippled. John turned away, jaw clenched. He couldn't meet the boy's eyes. Naya stepped forward and gently took Eddie's hand in hers, kneeling beside him. We're not going to become what destroyed the Vance, she said, her voice shaking but firm. We're not them. If we survive by choosing who dies, we've already lost. Elara finally moved, slowly sinking down into the operations chair. She looked older than she had hours ago. Her fingers ran across the armrest as if grounding herself. We have to decide soon, she murmured. Station Tess's stabilizers are failing. Its orbit's degrading. If we dock, we might not escape the drift. If we leave, we may never get this close again. Mallory leaned against the bulkhead, arms hanging limp at her sides, staring into the darkness beyond the viewport. So the question is, she said softly, almost to herself, do we try to save them, or do we try to save ourselves? No one answered. The stars offered no clarity.
2 months had passed since Ayla Janeway's trembling fingers had laid the final repair plate over the hull breach. Since then, the shuttlecraft cat had been her world, her classroom, and her fortress. Today, BOB was running a lesson on foraging theory and alien planet identification, information meant for when Ayla finally reached Proxima Centauri B. The main display showed sample flora in shifting hues, each one labeled with mineral indicators, sap viscosity, and projected toxicity scores. Ayla, now taller in posture and steadier in tone, tapped her stylus against the armrest of the pilot's chair as she took notes on a worn data tablet.
So red roots might mean a heavy nitrate presence, which could mean a good water source nearby, she muttered.
Correct. Bob chimed in. Coloration near the stem junction is a key clue, especially if ultraviolet reflection is low. You are learning quickly. Ayla grinned a little.
Well, you're a pretty decent teacher. Suddenly, the shuttle shuddered. The vibration started low, a faint hum, like an approaching thunderstorm muffled by distance. Ayla's eyes flicked up from her tablet. Then the tremble deepened into a groan. The walls began to vibrate in earnest. A loose food wrapper slid off the galley counter. Ayla stood, gripping the back of the chair. Bob? What's happening?
There was a brief delay before Bob's voice answered. Distorted slightly. External sensors detect space turbulence. A gravitational eddy pocketed with dense micromatter. Warning, structural integrity is within limits, but the turbulence may intensify. Ayla sat back down, strapping in fast.
Define intensify, please. Before Bob could answer, the shuttle jerked, hard. The entire craft rocked sideways. The display screens flickered, and the hum of the stabilizers surged.
Autopilot disengaged, Bob said, his voice glitching. You will need to adjust manually.
Ayla's heart slammed into her chest. Wait, what? I have to fly? Yes. Stick input. Control override required. More vibrations. Something clinked in the back. A warning light flashed red on the console. Collision hazard, debris impact risk. Outside, invisible in the black, a storm of space debris, tiny rock shards and drifting fragments, was pelting the shuttle at high velocity. Not large enough to punch through the hull, but enough to knock systems offline.
Bob's voice stuttered. And I don't need to stabilizer.
Bob? Bob? Static. Ayla stared at the controls. Her fingers trembled. She'd sat at this console for months, memorized its layout, trained in simulations. But this wasn't practice. This was real. Another lurch shook the shuttle. The control stick jolted against her hand. Lights flickered again, yellow now, flickering red. The artificial horizon display was spinning. Slowly at first, then faster. Panic clawed her throat. She pressed her hands to her forehead. I can't do this. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And then Bob's voice crackled in, faint but steady.
Ayla, you can. Listen to me. Lateral thrusters. Gentle tap. Find equilibrium.
Her breath hitched. Okay, she whispered. Okay, lateral thrusters. She gripped the control stick, her knuckles white, and nudged the side pad. The shuttle jolted, but began to slow its spin. Another tap, another course correction. For the next 2 hours, Ayla fought the turbulence like a sailor in a solar storm. Bob's voice came and went, offering brief instructions in half sentences.
Recalibrate pitch. Yes. There. Good. Avoid full correction. Too much. Feathering. Shield grid holding. For now.
She gritted her teeth, eyes locked on the console. Time blurred. Her body ached from the tension. Her eyes burned. Every time she thought the storm had passed, another wave of shaking hit. She screamed once, cursed once, laughed once when a soda pouch floated by her head mid-roll, and still she didn't stop. Not until the storm quieted. Not until the rattling faded into a whisper. Not until the red warning lights dimmed, and the main display began to flicker green. Then, Bob's voice returned, crystal clear.
Stabilizers realigned. Autopilot available. You may re-engage.
Ayla blinked tears from her eyes and reached for the control. Autopilot. Re-engaged, she whispered. The shuttle hummed back to level. A moment passed, then another, then Ayla. She looked up, still breathing hard. Bob's voice was warmer now, slower, deliberate.
You performed beyond expectation. Your reflexes were adaptive. Your decision-making was intuitive. And your survival instincts were exceptional.
She let out a slow, shaking breath. I almost lost it.
But you didn't, Bob replied. You held the line, and I'm very proud of you.
Ayla froze. Her throat tightened again, but not with fear this time. Proud? She echoed softly.
Yes, Bob said. That's what your mother would have said. I believe. You stayed in the game. You didn't give up.
Ayla smiled. Small, but real. Thanks, Bob.
A pause. Now, Bob said with mock seriousness, I recommend we suspend training protocols for the next 72 hours. Rest is vital for both neural recovery and emotional regulation.
Are you giving me a break? Ayla asked.
I am, Bob said, and I suggest you spend part of it engaging in your preferred low-stress activity.
Ayla raised an eyebrow. You mean drawing?
Your marking pens from Locker 3B are on your desk. Your suit is also clean and available should you wish to add new designs.
She laughed, full, rich, and alive. You're not so bad for a floating brain.
And you are not so bad for an unlicensed pilot, Bob replied.
Ayla unbuckled from the flight chair, and as artificial gravity slowly stabilized beneath her feet, she stood on slightly wobbly legs, still buzzing with adrenaline. The floor felt reassuringly solid after hours of white-knuckle turbulence. She moved toward the back of the shuttle, where the familiar hum of the galley and systems core offered a kind of domestic comfort. She reached for the soft, well-worn pouch of marking pens on the shelf beside her bunk, then sat at the small fold-out table mounted to the wall. It clicked into place with a gentle thunk, a sound she now associated with calm. From the supply drawer, she pulled out a fresh patch of white suit fabric, salvaged from an unused Eva glove lining, and smoothed it flat beside her older sketches. Her suit hung nearby, draped across the maintenance locker like a work of living art. Vines of inked wildflowers curled across the sleeves, nebula patterns bloomed along the back panel. She turned slightly, eyeing a blank space above the right boot collar. Ayla selected a vibrant green marker, uncapped it, and began adding a new cluster of ivy climbing along the lower leg. Her lines were smoother now, more confident. There was steadiness in her hands, a rhythm in the silence. The storm had passed. The girl was still standing, and the suit, her story, continued to bloom. Tune in next Sunday for episode 3. Please like, share, and subscribe to never miss an episode.